Welcome to the Norwich Economic Publication Podcast. Today we are diving into the newly released UK budget. This budget lays out key plans for government spending, taxes, and economic priorities. And it's set off to affect individuals, businesses, and the economy as a whole. But rather than just reporting the facts, we wanted to hear what people think about it. So, we interviewed students and lecturers from a range of backgrounds, asking them what they know about this budget, what stood out to them, and how they think it will impact everyday life. In this episode, we'll be sharing their thoughts and insights, breaking down the big ideas behind the budget and what it could mean for all of us. Thanks for tuning in. So, are you from an economic background?
No, not at all.
What are you doing as students?
Biology.
What is your understanding of the budget?
So I've only really seen what's been on the frontline news, such as like the big sort of like tax increases, stuff like that. Apart from that, not really a lot. I haven't really delved that far into it.
No, you just I've seen.
Just seeing like what the big news was, and then came up on my social media, stuff like that.
I see. So do you know basically which organization oversees the budget and what are the goals?
I don't know the name. The word treasury comes to my mind.
Okay.
Which I've heard, but don't know much about. But I think their goal is to just kind of increase what's the word again? It's increase how much money we have to live, because obviously all the cost of living crisis and everything going on, while also keeping the money for themselves as well.
Yeah, you think they're going to keep some of the money?
Well, they want to just make as much money as possible. Everyone does, don't they? So.
Okay, yeah, I can understand. So you've seen in the headlines some policies. For you, what policies, if any, have you heard about, and which one do you think is the most significant?
The one that's going to affect me most probably is, I don't know if you've heard, the bus fares are increasing.
Tell me
I use the bus quite a lot, so
okay.
What is it, £2 to £3 I think roughly. So I think that one. But also I've heard all about the capital gains tax, the business tax is going up, stuff like that. I don't know the specific numbers, but national insurance I think has changed in some way.
Okay. So you've seen some quite of
just the main ones, tax and everything going on. I think they increased the budget. They're increasing healthcare budgets and stuff like that, trying to help people out, I suppose.
Yeah, which can be a good thing.
Okay.
So
right, yeah.
How do you think this budget was received?
What I've heard from other people, I've had conversations with my family about it, not very well. I think that some of my mum's a business owner, so she wasn't very happy about the business rates and tax rates going up. So she wasn't too happy about that. I think a few of the policies have gone over well, but obviously Labour have to be harsh when deciding the budget, so you're always going to annoy quite a few people with it when you.
Yeah, of course.
When you make people spend money, you're gonna.
Yeah, there will be people that are happy, and of course people that are unhappy.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Chinemere, and I'm the Associate Editor at the NEP, which is the Norwich Economic Publication, and here just to give a brief overview on the Autumn Budget 2024. As so many of you might already know, so this particular budget has so many policies and so many fiscal measures towards strengthening the UK's government and also tackling some of the challenges in United Kingdom. And basically there are 5 major key points or policy measures that the budget has highlighted. One of them has to be on economic growth and fiscal stability. So the budget is targeted towards boosting the GDP, which is the gross domestic product of the United Kingdom, to 2% by 2025. So an increase in GDP by 2% by 2025. And then again, another key point of that budget is investment in public service and infrastructure. So there has been an additional 22.6 billion pounds for Department of Health and Social Care by 2025 to 2026, and this particular amount or additional funding is geared towards improving the infrastructures in the NHS on the care service to reduce the number of queues and to make sure that people are being attended to on time, and there are additional beds and diagnostics equipment at the NHS. And then the next one is the cost of living and social support. So there is also a policy around increasing the minimum wage for workers here in the UK, and also providing some sort of support for social security, some sort of social security adjustment for some persons in the UK. And then again, another major and critical point in that budget is the support for businesses and tax adjustment. So most businesses in the UK will be having some capital gains, and then some other tax adjustment to just help boost businesses here in the UK. And the last one, which is very critical and has to do with sustainability, is the environmental and energy policy. So the budget captures incentive for electrical vehicles, and then energy profit levies for companies that intend or that work towards the sustainability of the UK government. So this is quite interesting economic policies towards strengthening the UK government, and I'm just looking forward to the outcome of it in the following year, 2025, as it has to do with the implementation, and I'm also expectant of what the outcome will be to me as an international student and to some other persons, every common UK resident here in the United Kingdom. Thank you. Okay, hello, good afternoon, Professor Barton. Please, can you tell us your name and what you do here at the Eco Department?
Of course, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to do this. I'm Dr. James Watson, and I'm an associate professor in the School of Economics, and I teach macro to our second years, and I teach finance to our master's students.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah, I know I've met you several times, but
this is one of my students, so we know each other very well.
Yeah, I just want to go straight into the question, talking about the autumn 2024 budget that has been released by the new government. So I just wanted to know, what are your views about the budget?
Okay, so I think the government is in a very difficult position because of the state of the finances of the UK. I think that position was made more difficult by promises that were made ahead of the election, notably around promising not to increase taxes for what I think has been called working people. There are obviously questions, and there are different opinions on the extent to which there was a black hole in the budget, or there were challenges around the budget that they faced. What I think then the Labour government has first and foremost tried to do is, over the next 5 years or so, preserve investment and spending as a proportion of national income. There was a significant tax cut, so just focusing briefly on one of the major things that's happened in the budget, there was a significant tax cut, or a cut to national insurance by the previous government. This wasn't really funded, and the extent to which the Office for Budget Responsibility mapped out the forecast for the previous government was that this was going to lead to a further decline in government investment and spending as a proportion of GDP. The most significant increase in taxes in this budget is again to national insurance, but it's a different sort of national insurance. It's the national insurance that's paid by employers. And there are two parts to this: a 1.2 percentage point increase, but perhaps more importantly and more significantly, a reduction in the point at which firms need to pay this extra national insurance, reduced to a new threshold of £5,000. I'm focusing on that one here because this is the one that's going to raise in the order of sort of 20 odd billion pounds apparently. I would suggest to students or anyone who's interested, the Office of Budget Responsibility, and it's their role to sort of comment on decisions that the government makes and the potential implications, and they forecast based on those things. Their reports are very, very interesting, not least because they talk about the behavioural effects So if you read their report, we might think, oh, James has just said there's an increase in employers' national insurance, but actually, somewhat obviously with our understanding of economics, but also thinking, but also from the Office of Budget Responsibility report, we can see that actually while notionally it's an increase on employers, in the end, even the Office for Budget Responsibility predict that a large proportion of the tax increase will fall on working people, whether it's through smaller wage increases in the future, for example. So I think that's the most significant part of the budget. There are some changes around capital gains tax. That's something we talk about in class, isn't it? Yeah. And there are very contentious questions around whether capital gains should be taxed at a different rate to income, something around inheritance tax as well. And again, these are issues where people will have very, very different and contentious views. But I would recommend anyone to have a flick through one of these Office of Budget Responsibility reports.
So you've actually responded to most of my other question. I was about to ask the goal of this particular subject budget.
Yeah, I mean, so it does mean, what does the budget mean? It does mean a bit of extra money, particularly for health and education over the coming years. The extent to which investment in education and health, the extent to which, or the time period over which that might work, and the OBR do mention this in their report, could be quite a long time. And if there's a negative or a perceived negative in the budget, it is that the OBR predictions for UK economic growth over the next 4 or 5 years, or out to about 2030, aren't particularly good. A bit of a stimulus in the near term, a bit of a boost in growth in the very near term, but beyond that, the current predictions are roughly in line with the predictions from before the budget, the ones that were made back in March. Difficult decisions. Politics had a role to play in this. If it were up to me, maybe the government should have just come clean and said, look, we do need to raise taxes, and maybe the increase on employers' national insurance is not the best one for them to have made. Again, people will have very different views on that. And I think the more pessimistic bit of me, and again, this is all in the OBR report, is when we look at what this means going out 4 or 5 years. In the end, spending and investment are higher, by tens of billions of pounds higher than they were planned to be, but the forecasts under the previous government were for those things to decrease at a time when an ageing population and the various challenges the UK faces really needs, if anything, an increase in investment and spending in these areas.
It's okay, that's quite very profound. And my other question would be, what do you think is a specific policy out of this budget and that relates to the common person, common UK residents?
I'm personally pleased to see the significant increases around minimum wages. I think I think it's very, very tough for many people in the UK and other countries around the world at the moment. Again, there's a large literature on minimum wages, but I'm pleased to see those increases because I think for all of us, there'll be many students who are working on very, very low wages. It's very, very difficult following the bout of inflation, particularly that we've seen over the last few years, the so-called cost of living crisis. So I think that's something that will affect people in a good way who need help.
Sure. So my last question, how do you think the budget was received generally?
I guess how it's received depends on how much it affects you. I think something that's very interesting, a couple of interesting snippets to finish. If you go back to the Daily Telegraph, June earlier this year, the headline was something that amounts to both parties are lying to you. Whatever happens, they will need to pay up taxes. So that draws on things I've said already, the state of the UK finances. We're just in a world where taxes were going to have to go up one way or another. So that's one part of this. And I think within that, there is some interesting polling data from before the election that, notwithstanding that both of the major parties were saying we won't put your taxes up, that people were anyway expecting taxes to go up. And indeed, maybe a majority of people who might well have voted Labour were happy or accepting of taxes going up, and the proviso here, and I think this is what will become the big challenge for this government. I think people are prepared, many people are prepared for taxes to go up, but they will want to see an improvement around things like health and education and social care. And I think the challenge, the political challenge later in this parliament will be if they don't start to see those or perceive those improvements, then I think this becomes much more challenging. But in the end, simple answer to your question, if you've got lots of money, you've got lots of wealth already, probably not a big fan of an increase in capital gains tax. If you're working on minimum wage, you're probably very happy for minimum wages to go up.
Yeah, but just something very interesting I wanted to ask. So if people are expecting the taxes to go up and at the same time expect the minimum wage to go up, so is it not like counteractive? Because
yeah, I mean there is some of that. I mean I think while it's been paused, I think a big drag on many people will be this, they call it the fix, the period, the threshold at which you pay income tax.
okay.
So because that threshold, you may have come across it, because that threshold is fixed for at least another couple of years, more and more people will be dragged into paying income tax. So yeah, I mean it's, again, I think this is where the OBR do a very good job. You know, they talk about the various effects, and that, you know, there will be people who benefit and there will be people who don't. And you do sometimes get these double effects. You know, potentially someone can get a pay rise that sounds like a good thing. Income tax is always marginal anyway, so it's not that, you know, sort of suddenly going in means but no, there are some very and I think that for an economics student, I think that's one of the most interesting bits about the OBR report, where it does repeatedly refer to these so-called behavioural effects. Okay, this is the headline. Sometimes I think we refer them to as second or third order effects. So okay, this is the headline, but where will the incidence of this tax actually fall? Or at least where do the OBR think the proportion of the incidence of the tax will actually fall?
Thank you so much, Professor Watson.
Oh, thank you very much.
It was nice
Thank you
having
for coming.
you here.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Norwich Economic Publication Podcast. We hope our breakdown of the budget and insight from students and lecturers gave you a fresh perspective. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the NEP channel for more episodes. If you enjoyed this discussion, give us a like and let us know in the comment if you have any question or suggestion topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Thanks again for tuning in, and we look forward to bringing you new economic insight next time.